Okay, so we have one last alteration to do, and that is where we're going to take it in a little bit at the chest and the hip. All right? So I'm going to show you on one, I'll just show you on the back, and then I'll show you what we have to do to our sleeve to match, and then the front you just do exactly the same. Okay, what I like to do is write on my patterns when I'm doing things. So the chest, which is going to be right around here. Now, if you look here on the front, they give you an arrow for the chest. And you can see it's right here where this underarm is. So right there, I need to take this out. I'm just going to put here minus a ½ inch. Okay? And then at the hip, which is going to be just right about where the shirt ends, I'm going to take that out 3/8. Okay, so that's my measurement. So I've written it on the patterns. I'm going to write it here too. And I like to go through and do this so that I can kind of size up my pattern and see what has to be done. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have drawn the seam lines, because as you know, there's only cutting lines put on your patterns with the multi-sizing. But this is a good example of being careful and making sure you do the right lines, because I did this nice beautiful seam line, realized it was for the small. So now I got to do it for the medium. So sometimes you have to kind of write on here just so you remember. Okay, so I redid that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up here, right up underneath the arm, and this is where I need to go. So I'm just going to go straight in like here. Okay, right along that seam. And when I draw in my seam lines, I use this clear ruler and I just line this up. So here's my medium. I line that up to my 5/8, and then I'm able to just draw that. Okay? And then I just, and where there's a curve, I just kind of have to line it up for maybe, and draw for like 2 inches, and then line it up and kind of turn. We do have a ruler in the lab. One side is straight, one is curved, and it's the exact width of a seam allowance. And so you're welcome to use that, but I just went ahead and used the little clear grid ruler, just so that you don't feel like you have to have that other ruler. Okay, so here I am. I'm cutting right along the seam. Okay, now, when I did this, I didn't have my length alteration done, so I better draw that in so I have a line to use. Okay, now can you see from this why you have to have your length done first? Because all of your alterations involve the length alteration involves the entire pattern, changes the entire both sides. So you want to make sure you get that done so that when you do the other one, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so all right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go right up to my seam, and then I'm going to stop. Now, hinging. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I've got to hinge it. Now, I'm going to get rid of some of this extra because it kind of gets in my way when I'm trying to hinge. So when I hinge, I go from the corner right to where I stopped. Okay, so there's that hinge. And then here's another corner that we have to hinge. Now I've still got my large on here. If it bothers you, you can go ahead and get that off. I just leave it on, but I'm used to doing this. Okay, so I'm going to bring this in a ½ inch. And again, I'm used to increasing, so I've got to, because that's how I always show students that. And then here is 3/8, so I got to remember. Okay, so now I am just going to cut this off actually, because there's no way I can go from 0 to 3/8 in that space. And really, if I needed it, if I want to decrease it at the hip, that means the bottom width. So I just tape that back together, and now I'm just going to cut that right off. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this in. Okay, and I'm going to keep my corners where they're at. And this would have been a good one to do on here so I can pin it. But I'll just show you what I'm doing. Okay, the other thing is I because of my hinge here now, I can also hinge this up to match. Okay, so I'll just get it laid on here. And then here's my 3/8 right there. There we go. So there's 3/8. Here's my 1/2 inch. And again, I want to put it right here where they match. And then I can now use my hinge. But I will go ahead and tape this, and I'm just going to tape it in small increments until I get it exactly where I want it. I'm going to smooth it down, and that goes right there. So now I'm going to come down here and tape that. And then I'm going to, now that I've got this nice and smooth, I'm just going to run some of this tape along that edge and get this tape down nice. And in case you haven't noticed, I happen to really like tape. So I often go overboard. But here's that. Okay, now when up here, because I still got that hinge, if I would not have hinged that, this would have been way over here, and look how far in that would have gone. But because of my hinge at the seam line, I can now pull that back out and match that up so that it lines up perfectly with my cutting line. And then I don't lose anything along. I don't bring it in right here where I don't want to. Okay, so that's perfect. So I've taken it in here 1/2 inch. I brought it in here 3/8. I'm going to do the exact same thing to the front, but let me ask you something. Do I have to redraw anything? No, I don't, because I took it in. Does this affect any other patterns? Yes, it does. This armhole is now 1/2 inch smaller right through here. So that means I've got to now fix this one. So I'll just go over here, and this is the back, and this is the back. I've already drawn some lines over here. Okay, now I'm going to go in to the seam line for the medium. Okay, and I'm just going to go down like this and over like this. Okay, so I've got that done. Now I'm going to hinge it here. Okay, and I'm actually going to hinge it where I stopped, and I'm not sure I'm not sure exactly where I need to finish this, but I think I've gone far enough past. I should be fine. So I'm just going to hinge it right there. Okay, so now I have to bring this in 1/2 inch. So I'm going to measure here 1/2 inch, which is right there, and I'm just going to scoot this in. Where's my little mark? I've got several marks here, but that's the one I want right there. Okay, look, that blends very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin. I can pin this. All right, so I'm going to pin this and get that nice and smooth, and then I'll make sure I get the other side good. Now this one again, because I hinged, I can actually bring this up to match really well. Look at that. Perfection. Okay, so now I have fixed the sleeve to match the chest circumference. Okay, so again, we have to always be thinking on your alterations. What does this affect? Okay, so that looks really great. So I've made this 1/2 inch smaller through here, and this is 1/2 inch smaller through here.